Now, the current climate brought about by the pandemic has left many people battling psychological threats, and these are typically expressed through anxiety, depression and stress that has found many in a perpetual state of fight or flight mode as they square up against breaking point. Joining us now to help people navigate their way through the so-called pandemic burnout is Abdurrahman Kenny, Mental Health Portfolio Manager at Pharma Dynamics. Abdurrahman, good to have you. Good evening.
Good evening to you and good evening to you.
Now, it's only the beginning of the year, but many are already feeling like, look, it's time for me to switch off. Many have been dealing with lost loved ones, not just one, but many in a row. Many have been dealing with issues of having to go to work and not go to work because companies are opening and closing. Many have actually lost their work. There's a lot that has happened in just the first few months of the year that many are feeling really mentally tired. Could they be suffering from pandemic fatigue?
Yes, it can be. So because of all those factors that you mentioned, we as South Africans have been in a constant state of high alert during the pandemic with the constant fear of the potential dangers around us, like you mentioned, putting us in a state of fight or flight. Now, this mechanism of fight or flight is very useful in dealing with stressful situations in the short term. But this pandemic has been going on for quite a while now. It's been almost a year, which can be extremely draining physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Yeah. How are these psychological stresses putting a demand on our energy levels, but also generally, our levels of anxiety?
Yes, so the constant state of threats we are in are putting us in a constant state of stress, and these can lead to issues or mental issues like depression, anxiety disorders, and mood disorders if it does continue for an extended period of time. So it's important for us to try and combat these by putting strategies in place to live a healthier and more balanced lifestyle, despite the various restrictions that we are in under this lockdown.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned earlier that, of course, this is not a sprint. It does seem like we're in it for the long haul because, we are only beginning now to roll out vaccines for the frontliners. It looks like the rollout for the rest of the nation will probably be even later on in the year. So we are still going to be living with this condition of having to wear masks, having to social distance, having to sanitize and so on and so forth. How far are we from a breaking point, and what does that breaking point look like?
It looks like we are heading in that direction, but it is something that we can control, and there are symptoms that we do need to look out for, and those symptoms need to be recognized as early as possible so that we can put various things in place in order to combat these symptoms. And they can all be summarized as trying to live a healthy and balanced lifestyle despite the restrictions that we are in. And one thing that is very important is self-care. It's important to create time for oneself and not feel guilty about it. This can be through exercise, reading, meditation. There's many ways that one can practice self-care, but the bottom line is to make time to check in with yourself on a regular basis so that you can make sure that on a daily basis you are mentally okay.
Yeah. And I suppose part of that guilt would come when one feels like, well, I'm the only one who is feeling this way. And you're saying the actual truth is that one is not alone. In fact, there are many who are feeling this way.
Yes, it is. That is exactly the case. And it's important for us to be kind to ourselves and also be kind to those around us. We don't know what the next person is going through and the particular challenges that they might be going through. So if you are not as productive or motivated as you used to be, then it is okay. We're all living through a time of heightened anxiety and uncertainty.
Now, what's really striking for me, that something that has now become quite useful. In fact, you and I are on that platform right now as we speak, and that is the video conferencing platform, has actually become a source of stress. How does that play out?
Yes, like you mentioned, video calls have been or have become part of our daily lives. But video calls have been shown to be more mentally draining than face-to-face calls. And that is because if we just compare a face-to-face conversation, what happens usually is that our brains would subconsciously pick up on non-verbal cues such as body language, etc. So with video calls, our brain doesn't have that luxury, so it's constantly trying to fill the gaps and trying to add understanding to the conversation that is not necessarily as easy when you are having a face-to-face conversation. So if you are having these video calls all day, it's definitely contributing to our levels of fatigue that we are feeling at the end of the day. So the recommendation is to try and set strict time limits and drawing up agendas before the meeting so that you can stick to the pertinent points. It's also important to take breaks on a regular basis, especially if we can have these breaks outside, because the sun sunlight has been shown to have a drastic effect on our mood and our general sense of well-being.
Right. Now, earlier on in the pandemic, around this time last year, we here on the channel, for example, had a special program looking at flattening the curve, where we were giving constant figures, numbers, statistics, the movement of the pandemic in the country. I mean, I became tired of giving those numbers, but I mean, how were people feeling out there with that amount of information that was coming through?
Yes, like you said, we are living in the information age, where we are constantly bombarded by pandemic news from various media sources. And this can be a bit overwhelming as well. But one of the ways that we can try and combat this is to limit our media consumption, and also to try and make sure that the media sources that we do make use of are from reliable and credible sources.
Yeah. Is there a link between some reckless behavior where people are actually deciding to do away with the protocols of social distancing and so on and so forth, and the fact that they are actually pandemic fatigued?
Yes, so we like we mentioned before, we are in a constant state of stress, and people react to stressful situations in very different ways. Some of us do react, like you mentioned, in reckless ways, but if we do react in such a manner, then the important thing to remember is that we are not only putting ourselves in danger, but also those around us and our loved ones in danger as well. So it's important for us to try and maintain our discipline in trying to keep each other and ourselves safe.
All right, a mental health portfolio manager at Pharma Dynamics there, Abdurrahman Kenny. I appreciate your time and helping us through this conversation. Gain